episode of Reptile Fight Club. How's it going, people? My name's Justin Julander, in case you don't know. And here with me are a couple legends. Chuck, my co-host, what's up?
What's up, sir? How are you doing?
Doing great, yeah. Nice. We got Mr. Ron St Pierre back on the podcast.
Welcome.
Always great to have Ron. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. It's our pleasure for sure. Yeah. Well, what's going on, guys? What's going on in the reptile world for you both?
Ron, you want to take this one? Because it's not much for me. I'm not. I guarantee you got cooler shit going on than me.
It's not much for me either. I'm just fucking around with little side projects and little emerald tree boa thing going on, some cornrows and...
Yeah, just a little, 60 animal, 80 animal?
61 emeralds.
Yeah.
About 20 chondros and counting.
Just fucking
just
around with
a
little side project, I believe was the verbiage.
Right. Yeah. Pick up some Amazon tree boas and I don't know. Once again, I've lost my fucking mind and jumped off a cliff. But
well, they look cool. I mean, you got some pretty smoking animals.
Good cliff to jump off of. Yeah.
No, I'm actually really digging it. I've been, kind of bouncing around for years trying to find. I actually have always wanted to do this. I always intended to do the arboreal thing, and it just for a variety of reasons never happened. Finally, I hit the point where I felt like I had. It's time to do it.
Yeah.
So, I could see myself still doing this 20 years out, whereas anything else I've done over the last probably 20 or 30 years, I always just assumed I would do it for a few years and then move on to, whatever the next thing. Because my interests are broad and, so.
That's the challenge with herpetoculture is like finding, there's so many cool reptiles, like, finding something that you can stick with, or I don't know. I guess I can have a short attention span, but I kind of like the diverse collection. So I do, a couple pairs of each or something. I guess Western Stimsons, maybe I have, quite a few pairs, but everything else is like a pair or two, and I'm happy with that. But I think, we've talked about this in the past, to really do a species justice, you need a pretty good sized collection like that, like a 60 animal gig there.
Well, 60 was probably a little, I tend to take things a little too far and then I dial them back over time. And I actually, I initially was going to start out right away with 100 emeralds and just really go at it. Yeah. And then when I got to 60, I was like, maybe I should dial this down a little bit and focus a little more intently on. Yeah. It's really the fact that, and what we're going to discuss today is having to DIY the caging, and do a completely different thing than what's available is a daunting task.
Yeah, for sure.
We're on 5th iteration. That still not totally happy with them. So but they're getting there.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for down the road when I get to hear all your your insights into, how you're successful with these guys. So you're going to write a book or write, something for...
No, I mean,
something like that.
Warren Booth is already doing that. So, but if anything, obviously him and I have been in touch, and anything that I find, I'm absolutely going to pass that on. And
cool.
I've been talking about it freely, what I'm doing. I just don't want a bunch of people, because it's still in the testing phases and it's risky. I just don't want a bunch of people to go, oh, Ron St Pierre said this, and then go try to copy it and have it
for sure.
Because what I am doing is, the thing I always do is to take it all the way to look for I'm looking for the cutting edge. Yeah, the very edge of it, to take it all the way to right on the line between success and lunacy, and so that's what I'm doing, and so far everything that I predicted has come to pass, so it's been working incredibly well. They're basically the same thing as the giant anoles. So there's just some slight variations, and obviously emeralds are quite a bit more they're more touchy than than chondros. Like the chondros seem to really, they're totally thriving under the system with the rain, and because what I'm doing is putting the rain back in the rainforest. So, they've done. I mean, I've taken some pretty crappy imports that were on death's door, and after a couple of weeks under the system, they are amazing.
Wow.
So
interesting.
And it's been the same thing for the emeralds, but the emeralds are definitely trickier, and that's why I'm probably going to keep them sitting at the 61 they're at now. I'll probably dial it down to 20 pairs, and then I'll leave it. I had to gut my garage, and I turned it into what we're calling the oven. And it's basically the 2-car garage is superheated. We're keeping it at 95 degrees. Wow. And then I can roll everything out in the daytime and get sunlight, and then I can roll it into my porch area that's next to it, which is in the upper 70s, low 80s all the time. So I've got 3 zones that I can do with the emeralds. The chondros have needed none of that. They just need to be underneath the rain. As time goes on and things get more tested, I figure by next year I'll know how well it works as far as production and getting it. But as of right now, everybody that's been over here so far that's seen it has been fairly. They were like, "Wow, it's working really good," and they look good. Like everything looks amazing. Yeah. So.
Dang, that's awesome. Well, I guess cool. High risk, high reward. That's that's great to hear. I'm glad it's working out, and hopefully we'll see a ton of babies from you here in the near future.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. I've already had like meltdown stress moments where I thought everything was, because I keep expecting the legs to get kicked out from the table, and one day I walked out there and the not a chondro, that expensive, stupidly expensive pixel emerald that we brought in had its bottom jaw hanging down a little bit, and I was like, oh my god, it's gonna die. That's it, it's all over. And I freaked out. I talked to McNamara, and he was like, just calm down, dude. He's like, they do this all the time, it'll pop back in, it's like nothing. And then sure enough, an hour later it was back to normal. And
they do some weird shit with their jaws sometimes. That's a true statement.
But with that particular,
for sure, 61
here, and it had to be that one.
Say less, Ron. I'm totally with you there.
It was just like, fuck.
The things heart attacks are made of.
Sure.
That's cool. Well, best of success with that. I'm definitely excited to see where it goes. We still need to get our Reptile Fight Club trip out to Florida to check stuff out and to go herping with you.
For sure,
got to make that happen. I'm headed to Australia in a couple weeks, and that's when the NPR crew is headed out.
Right. Yeah, they're going to be right down the road. I talked to Rob the other day about that.
Nice.
So I'm sure they're going to come by, and
cool.
If I can get away, I'm going to go take them herping somewhere.
Yeah, cool. It was kind of a mixed bag there. I was like, I really, really wanted to make that trip, but when somebody says, "Hey, we'll fly out to Australia," it's like,
that's a hard one to pass.
Florida will be there,
Exactly.
Yeah. And Rob does tend to do trips 2 or 3 times, to kind of get, make sure he finds the stuff he wants to find. So we did a little rocket run to Arizona a couple weeks ago and had a pretty sweet trip. We found 3 price eye and a bunch of blacktail rattlesnakes. It was a really cool trip. Yeah. And the tiger, first tiger.
Oh yeah, tiger.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. But yeah, it's fun to herp with those guys. They're a lot of fun. But yeah, so I'll be sad to miss that, but I think I'll be.
You'll be all right, right?
Yeah. I was going to say Australia or Florida. Fuck Florida.
I found a spot that's not too far, so it's a little bit of an extension, about a 2.5 hour drive from kind of the northernmost point. But you can find womas, and there's like quite a few records from this spot, and I'm like, I think I'm going to drive a couple hours north to see if I can find some womas, So I'm kind of adjusting the plan accordingly. But yeah, it should be an exciting trip. And my buddy Jordan's going out and herping with me out there, so that'll be a lot of fun to herp with him. He's a cool guy. So
has he
very knowledgeable?
Is he game to just let you plan the trip, or is he already like? Have you discussed this with him yet?
That's always the trick, right? I sent him the itinerary, and he said this lines up with kind of what he's interested in seeing as well. So he's like, Morelia, Aspidites, blue tongues. I'm like, say no more. We're on the same page. This will be the trip for South Australia. So Perfect. We're spending a lot of time looking for those freaking carpets, but that's so hopefully we get lucky and see one or two. But they're a tough find. It's a little bit kind of slower herping, I think, from what I can tell. But hopefully, we'll just hit it right and find some cool stuff. But we've got chances for Molochs, for thorny devils, and for a couple of different knobtail species that I haven't seen before. So I need to see a western blue tongue in the wild. I still haven't seen a live one yet, so hopefully that's in the cards as well. But man, I don't know, just too many cool critters and too many cool places to go. So
for sure.
Yeah, still trying to. So I don't know if I talked to you about this, but I'm doing a 50th birthday party in Australia. So we're gonna get a group of guys and go out and herp in Australia. You're definitely welcome to join.
That's cool, man.
That'd be fun. Yeah. So I figured, why not? So.
Oh my God, you're gonna be 50 already?
Yeah, a couple more years. So 2025 is kind of the key time for that. So hopefully we'll get a good group out there and find some good stuff. I'm still trying to figure out where I want to go, because I was thinking South Australia and looking for these carpets for my 50th. But since I'm going this year, I'll see how it goes and see how the herping is. Because if I'm getting a group out there, it might be better to go somewhere like Western Australia or Central Australia, where the herping's a little different stuff. Yeah, a little more diverse, maybe even further north. I don't know, but we'll see how this goes and kind of go from there. But like I said, too many cool places out there to explore.
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't even really think about how big Australia is and how little of it is. I mean, there's places in there where, if I'm not mistaken, a huge portion of Australia has never been really explored or cataloged, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's just not roads to a lot of the places, or it's Aboriginal land,
can you imagine what might be going around out there, right?
Yeah. Well, my first trip over there in 2010, he was a keeper at the Alice Springs Desert Museum, which is kind of like the Tucson, that outdoor zoo type thing, but kind of more naturalistic, but really cool spot. But he was saying that there was an Aboriginal group that had a photo of a leucistic Brettles, pure white Centralian carpet. And they say once in a while it'll crawl through their house, where they live or whatever, like crawl through their yard, and they'll see this, leucistic Brettles crawling around, and they just let it go on its way, and they've seen it a couple times or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but there's no road to their place. They're just out. If they need to get somewhere, they have to walk several miles to get to, anywhere. So kind of cool to, think what's kicking around out there that we haven't discovered, or is just in some weird, inaccessible area. But that'd be fun to go out and explore some of those lesser explored areas. Yeah, someday, I guess. But well, all right.
Yeah.
Well,
what would you do with the leucistic Brettles?
I don't know.
What would you do?
I would probably give it to Nick or something.
I was going to say, give Nick a coronary if you. That's what you get for it.
I don't know. I just love the red. Like, I take away the red and it doesn't do a lot for me, I guess.
I agree. Well,
that does kind of ruin it.
Yeah.
Morphs don't make everything better.
Right.
That's one of the things I like about most of those, like chondros. They don't need any morphs at all.
You don't need more.
They're awesome on their own. So, and so are emeralds.
Yeah. It's funny how everybody wants to make a green tree python that's not green. They want it to be some other color. You're like, come on, guys. That's the reason they're so cool, is they're a green snake,
Yeah.
I guess the morph craze, right? It's fun. But
I think everybody wants something unique,
Yeah, the novelty.
That novelty, right, exactly. Sure. And that's why those like slow color change chondros get people and they love it. And it's cool if you want to spend that money and take all the photos you can and but it's going to turn out green, dude. It's going to turn out for the most. I mean, there's some animals that don't, but by and large, man, most of them end up green.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna fight about doing it yourself. To DIY or not to DIY, right? that is the question. The immortal bard laid out. So I don't know. I guess I think it's I'm kind of more on the DIY side. So we might have to get Chuck to fight you on this one, but we'll go ahead and flip a coin. We'll see.
Yeah.
Who wins that. So go ahead and call it, Chuck.
Tails.
Whoa.
There with the coin.
Yeah, I feel like
it was tails though. It landed tails. So
all right,
you got it. You want to fight Ron or
no? You get to fight Ron.
Okay, I'll fight Ron. All right.
And I think you should take the non-DIY side.
Well, we'll let the coin decide.
Whatever, man. I'm just saying. You
want to call that one, Ron?
Heads.
It is heads.
Nice.
Yep. I lost both of them, but so.
What a loser you are today, Zoolander.
That's all right. That's all right.
Damn.
I can take it.
I'm taking the DIY side because I.
There you go.
Yeah, that's probably a better show anyway. So. All right. Well,
I just want you to know that I wanted you to argue this because it goes against your instincts.
But then sometimes when I choose the side that I don't think Chuck will want to take, he's like, "Oh, I wanted that side." I'm like, "Okay." I don't even agree with that.
Well,
side.
I helped you out and just let you know what I was thinking this time.
True.
You know what I mean?
All right. Well, Ron is the big winner here. You want to lead us out, or you want me to go first?
I mean, go, Ron.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, you fucking go. Fucking go. Nice try. You just tried to say it in a nice way, so Ron would be like, "Oh, I'll go."
He almost got me to do that.
He did. Yeah. He did. Like, no, be ruthless with that shit. Yeah. All right, what say you, Zoolander?
Well, I think the biggest downside to DIY, at least in my life, is the time that it takes to do things yourself. It's one thing to buy cages, have them delivered, set them up. That still takes a little bit of time. But if you're building the cages, furnishing them, doing all these things, it can take a lot of time. So, for me, I've got a bunch of wood in the garage just waiting to be made into cages, and I got it a year and a half ago, and I still haven't. I made a couple, and I just I thought I'd do it a lot faster, but it's a little more time intensive than I thought it would be. So, and I go and work on them for a bit and figure out, okay, I need this length and to make the frame to frame out the door or whatever, and then I forget the measurements, so I don't write them down, or I lose my the notes I took, and then I go back and I have to measure everything again and figure it all out again. So it just adds time. But I think that's probably the main downside of doing it yourself or one of them anyway, is the time that it takes. And I guess if you're doing it full time, that might, you still have a lot of animals you got to take care of, and so it's not like you have any more time than anybody else. But and I guess if you make it a priority, you can do it. But sometimes you might have to neglect other things that need to be done as well. So the time suck is one of the major drawbacks of doing it yourself.
All right, ring the bell. Zoolander just won. I can't. I mean,
you're experiencing that, right?
Oh yeah, no.
But it doesn't stop you. So
yeah. I'm totally in the middle of that. It's taken way longer to, this whole emerald thing that we're doing with the arboreals. We're not doing anything that is commonly done. So no commercial caging works for this. I've attempted it with some of the commercial screen caging and stuff, but they all fall short to what I need to get out of them. So, but this has kind of been my entire career in this. Even when I started 40 years ago, I mean, I didn't have any money at all. Like we were broke as hell. So I had to DIY everything, and I had to learn that. And, fortunately, growing up the way I did, and a lot of the way I view the world and all that kind of lent its. I'm basically a hardcore DIYer. That's part of the whole punk metal scene kind of thing that I when I'm not doing reptile shit or gaming stuff, that's kind of my other thing that I'm really follow and stuff. So and then as I got older, though, as I've kind of moved along in this, I realized that the needs that I have for the stuff that that I work on, it generally is not available in a commercially purchased product. Most of the commercial product doesn't have enough ventilation for what I need, so I end up doing even if I buy commercial caging, I end up having to hybridize it myself and chop it all up. So at that point, I may as well build exactly what I want. But just like you said, it's the time suck. Like I started this emerald thing 6 months ago, expecting to have, be way further along than I am. But like you said, we converted a huge portion of the building to basically an aluminum kind of factory shop thing. And I actually have my buddy Scott coming over 3 days a week and working here and helping us do it. But it's still taking forever because it's just not simple. And neither one of us are professional builders. So that's the time, these guys that are really good at that, they can just chop and get it done. That ain't how it works here. And then, like you said, you're constantly getting pulled away that, there's a fire over here, when you have a lot of animals, there's always some shit going on that you got to go and make some kind of modification. And then there's half your day is shot at that point. So, but I mean, but I'm arguing the wrong side here. But the primary thing of it is that you get to tailor it to exactly what you want for the exact needs that you're trying to meet. And then it's, you're cutting the labor out. So, labor cost anyway. So, if you don't have a lot of money, DIY really is the way to go. I can't think of any instance where, that's part of that's one of the biggest overhead parts of this, if you're doing this for a living or even as a hobby. Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest expenses is caging. That's one of the killers. So, you can cut that out if you're even somewhat handy. And trust me, I'm not handy, and somehow I make this happen. So, I can't even change a doorknob. That's what I have Jason Hood for. I'm like, dude, the doorknob's busted. Next time you're over here, can you swap it out? So, so it's it's that bad. But,
well, and I'm maybe kind of to that point. When you do it yourself, like I'm finding out, there's added costs that I didn't consider. I thought, I'll just do this and that. And then if I cut it wrong or something, you waste some. And so, like you said, the professionals, they can get in there, zip it out and be done with it. And so, I've heard of people kind of hiring people out to build stuff. And it sounds like you've got a buddy that'll, help you out in that regard to, that has some skills in certain areas or whatnot. So, but I can't argue with the cost savings overall. You're probably going to make 2 cages for the price you can buy one. And if it's not commercially available anyway, then,
even if you got to make it 4 times.
I guess that's the caveat is if you don't like the finished product and
you're a one and done DIY guy. But I think Ron is more of like an evolutionary kind of DIY
that is true,
guy.
It's
that's
true. Like I said, we're already on the 4th iteration.
Well, and as long as you can either revamp versions 1 through 3 or or use them for something else, it's not a complete loss, and I definitely have found uses for things or disassemble them and use the parts to change it in a certain way. That can be tricky.
I've
sometimes.
done
I'm not trying to say that money shouldn't be the primary factor in all of this, but, because obviously it has to be in some, fashion, but, maybe money not being the point of it, DIY sounds pretty good at that point,
Mm-hmm.
And then, especially if you have to iterate it to make it better and better and better.
Yeah. And that's really for me, that's the big selling point is that, okay, well, if I buy if I spend, a couple grand on a commercial caging thing and it doesn't do what I need it to do, and then I got to start chopping it up anyway. Now I'm way in the hole. Whereas this, kind of like what Justin said, we're each one of the iterations, nowadays, let me back that up a little bit. My old method of doing this was build a system, realize that it sucks, and then trash the whole thing. It actually turned into this enormous pile of shit behind my building that we had to rent 3 freaking giant dumpsters to get rid of, and that was only 3 years worth of throwing shit at the wall. There's probably so much money lost there I don't even want to know about it.
Yeah.
But I was trying all these different kind of like I tried. We were in a warehouse for a while, so that I totally wasn't ready for that, and I was trying all these things, and they all were just awful. And then we moved out here, and then I tried some stuff with the building, and I didn't like that. But for this particular project, I actually sat down and spent a long time, like months, thinking about, okay, I needed to do this, that, and the other thing. And what's going to look the best? I wanted it to look nice, whereas typically I don't give a shit. A box is a box.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't really care, how it looks, just as long as it's totally functional for what I need and it gets the job done. But this time I was like, I want to actually kind of really enjoy this. I want to walk out there and have everything be uniform.
Yeah.
And then I'm pumping a massive amount of water. Like, we built an entire overhead sprinkler system that's 10 feet in the air, suspended above all these enclosures that we turn on, and we actually rain for several hours a day on all this stuff. And to do that, when you start pumping that much water into a species like that, which I now absolutely am convinced that that's one of the primary problems in captivity, is that these things need an immense amount of rain. It takes, on average, 20 minutes of hardcore rain to even trigger them to begin to drink. But once they drink for a long time. And they'll do this every day. But they don't do anything for 15 minutes until 15 to 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden they all start drinking. And you can see this like down the line. All these, like, if you have one or two, you don't know, is that kind of anecdotal? But when you have 80 snakes doing it, and the vast majority of them are doing it at the same time, that's a pretty...
That's real data right there.
Yeah. So, but in order to do that, you have to rate, the temperatures must be much higher, because they got to be able... I found that they tend to like 94 degrees is what they're looking for, body temp. So, and the gravid females are 111, and it's almost to an animal. So... they got to get really hot, much hotter than where people do. And then when you're putting that much rain in there, you better damn well have really good ventilation, or they'll get sick. So you're looking at heat and super high humidity, super high amount of water, and to be able to actually pour down rain and not totally destroy your enclosures and flood them.
That's a big
ask. You ain't doing that without the hell out of that.
God damn. Yeah.
So
and
that's
more than just a cage, dude. That's like a whole system,
I mean, when I talk about it, that's what I do. I don't waste. I shouldn't say waste my time. I do this for a living. Obviously, you guys know this, but I do this for a living. This is what I do. So I can't have a pair of this and a pair of that. I can't have things that are not producing. If they're here and their money is going into them, they need to be. Efficiency is a big deal for us. If I had 60 snakes, this is why I'm doing this, though. The whole point of this, and to take it to this level on this edge, is to try to get the vast majority of them to produce every year, and not have 40 snakes and only have 3 or 4 go every season. I'm trying to get them all or most of them to go, and I've been able to do this with a lot of species. A lot of those lizard species are super fucking tough. Mm-hmm. I mean, snakes are not that much different in any way, really. So I'm looking for that same kind of like I said, the bleeding edge. Mm-hmm, and I think this system is going to have those results. And cool. And if it doesn't this year, maybe another year of tweaking. Mm-hmm. Winter is already.
But you feel like you're on to something that's for sure. That's
dude,
going to be it's going to be solid. Now you're looking at minor tweaking, right? Like, is how you kind of feel about it. Okay,
yeah.
Not to put words in you. I was just kind of like,
No, and I actually have been working on this privately in my head for 10 years. Like, this isn't something I just started on a whim. 10 years ago, when I realized that all those giant anoles had all of the same issues that chondros and emeralds have, including chronic regurgitation if they get too dehydrated. Mm-hmm. And in the process of me, and honestly, I started working on it, and every time I would defeat an issue, because it's one thing, like, you see a lot of people that are fairly successful with them, but when you have a pair of something and you get 6 eggs a year, that is successful. Mm-hmm. But that's not really where the bleeding edge on those things are. The bleeding edge on those things is 25 eggs a year per female. And the bleeding edge on those things is that, you have, they're almost all burning at max capacity all the time. They're, they're extremely efficient. So, but to get there requires a lot of creative stuff. And honestly, it took 10 years. Every couple years, I would defeat a problem. One of the problems with them was obviously getting enough water in them. Mm-hmm. And then I was at a Culver's with Casey Cannon, and he was sitting across from me, and we were shooting the shit about different stuff. And all of a sudden, what I refer to as the water bowl problem just clicked. Yeah. And I was like, oh, there it is. Because snakes drink from a water bowl and anoles don't. So you would think that that because they drink from a bowl, that would be enough. Why would you have a hydration problem as long as you got a fresh water bowl in there? Mm-hmm. But that ain't true, man. Mm-hmm. And what it is they require fucking prompting. Just like I think this is true of all shit. Mm-hmm. Because we've actually seen it with the blue tongues. When we started overflowing the bowls every day, all of a sudden we didn't get slugs anymore, and our efficiency went through the roof because they're ectotherms, and they require environmental prompting for every single life activity. All snakes do. Think about it. The number one thing when you ask people about changing their water, they all say the same thing. Oh, I change the water once a week, but you know what? I notice that when I change it, they all come over and drink. So that's why, because you prompted them to come and drink. Otherwise they sat in the corner and they were in a state of mild dehydration until something prompted them, or they happened to, run into the bowl. But think about it. Mm-hmm. That's why it happens all the time. It's whether it's the smell of the water of just adding fresh water, or whether it's the action of you sliding open the enclosure and then adding a little. So I noticed that, a few years ago, listening to podcasts and stuff, everybody would say the same thing. And I'm like, oh, well, I wonder. But I never could really rectify it. And then, I figured it out for my own personal. That was just like the last thing. I just could never come to terms with that, because I was like, okay, well, as long as the water bowl's full, they should be fine. But that's not it. And for the emeralds and chondros particularly, it seems like they need a long period of emeralds, particularly. Chondros they seem to be a little less. They're probably from a slightly drier area, maybe. I'm not really, I haven't been on the ground myself on either location, so I can only go by what I've read and people I've talked to that have been there. But but with the emeralds, for sure, it's a full 15 minutes before they really seem to get triggered. And once they do, they drink a lot, and they drink every day. Yeah. So I think
I think that's that critical idea of knowing what an animal needs and how to provide it. That's and for the most part, we don't necessarily think a lot about that, because we get a care sheet or we talk to somebody who's been successful with them and they tell us what they do, and you're like, okay, now I know how to do it and now we're good. But nobody ever does what you're, well, I won't say nobody ever does it, but people tend to kind of go with what's easy instead of risking an animal to test a hypothesis to see if a new, thing is going to work. And I mean, you're doing that. And, like you said, you put a lot of thought into it and a lot of research into it, thinking about their natural environment and stuff. And I mean, that interview on Chameleon Academy podcast with Peter Nekus I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, but he talked about how he'd never seen a chameleon drinking water. He'd seen him do everything else in the wild. And then he weighed a chameleon before it went to sleep. And then he weighed it again when it woke up. And it had gained substantial weight overnight
from water vapor,
from fog. Yeah, just breathing in the water. And so who would have thought chameleons get their water from breathing it in? You spray down the leaves and they go over and lick it off. But now with that in mind of breathing in the water, a chameleon licking water off a leaf is severely dehydrated and desperate for moisture. Correct. It's going to do something it doesn't ever do in the wild. And so, but for how many years have we been spraying our chameleon cages down or letting it rain on them? And we think, okay, now I'm keeping my chameleon the right way. But for all those years, nobody really was. And now we've got foggers in there to turn on at night and fog them, and they get water how they're supposed to get water,
Yeah, and it could very well be the same thing for a lot of these snakes as well. Because my stuff's outside, I'm getting that. They're getting water vapor. And the property that we live on is sandwiched between two large lakes. So the humidity here is ungodly, and it's almost to the point where it's very uncomfortable to work outside in the summertime here. But it's been really good, like for a lot of this stuff, and I think so I do think that's part of it. I mean, if you think about the nature of that snake, all those, that compact coil arboreal, the condor or the emerald, they sit on the edge of branches. They're not in the middle. They're out there catching water. That's what that is. That's a water collection device. Yeah. It catches dew. It catches rain. Then they're also out there, they're immersed in it all the time. They're breathing in air, water vapor. And then on top of it, it floods where a lot of them are. They feed from the ground. So they come down at night. They pick their food off the ground. But if they're in a floodplain, they're probably going down there drinking that water. Then there's bromeliads and stuff like that occur there that also collect water in the branches. So when they're out cruising, maybe that's, they know, it rains. So now I can go over to this, this little plant that's attached to the side of this tree and I get my water there. So super water dependent. And I think that's been the limiting factor. And because of that, back to the DIY thing, that is why we had to change everything to make this happen, and DIY is really the only way to go. I mean, I'm not even sure though if there was a commercial available thing that I would still end up DIYing my own stuff at the end of the day, because nobody's going to do exactly what they're going to have like a base thing that's basically good, but it's not going to be exact to what you.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I were to try to replicate or make, like I saw what you did and okay, we got to make your. I can't take my stuff outside and do that in Utah. For maybe 2 months out of the year, 3 months out of the year. But then the rest of the time, I've got to do that indoors, and so it's going to be a completely different design. It might achieve the same goal. I might find a way to be able to get a bunch of shower stalls and line them up and just have water flood them a couple hours and have it recirculate or drain off or whatever. And so it's a completely different animal. So I can't just adopt exactly what you do. And so I think that's one of the now I'm arguing your side, but or my side as well. But when you DIY, you have to take in a lot more things into consideration, but I do think you can meet the needs of the animals better that way. Because using the chameleons again as an example. A lot of the chameleon breeders were in Florida, and they'd have screen cages outside. And so you don't need to do a lot. But then we try to have a screen cage inside in Utah, and it's dry, and you're always having to constantly put water in there. And it's like almost just like putting a Band-Aid on a open artery or something, trying to stop the bleeding, and it just doesn't work. So you need a solid wall cage or a glass cage or a bigger plastic cage or something to contain that humidity, and so just adopting something that somebody came up with is not the best way to do it. But like you said, you might go through several iterations to figure that out and figure out how to do it in your area, because you might do something and think this is going to fix it and it doesn't work. And you're like, well, it didn't, I didn't consider this, or I didn't take this into account, or, that, and the other. Like, I think you told us one time about building some outdoor caging, and then there was a tree that shaded that, half the, a couple months out of the year. Totally useless. But you don't want to cut down the tree because it's a substantial part of the landscape. So, you have to move those cages somewhere else or something.
I didn't even do that. I just don't use it. We use it for, I actually turned it into a prehensile tail skink enclosure for a while, which they worked really good under there because it was all shaded. But now we've got giant anoles in there and it's working well. So, but but it was initially done for the lace monitors and it was a total failure. Like they were just trapped in this shaded area for a significant portion of the year. And
but that definitely, that goes along kind of with our conversation is, you might fail with one species, but you can probably adapt it for something else to use. And that's an important. We got to have some input from Ruby. Come on, Chuck.
Right.
But, just having that and I will put out a plug for, knowing the natural history of the animals, knowing what they do in the wild. And, some of these, seeing them in the wild, like a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you get out and see them in the wild, it's going to help you understand. And I think like you've done is make those comparisons or jumps with species that you've seen in the wild, experienced in the wild, and know kind of their habits and how they're surviving and succeeding in the wild, and then adapting that to species from across the world, because I do think certain, rainforest inhabitants are going to get rain, so like you can probably make the assumption that any of them are probably going to be okay in that environment and actually benefit from it.
I mean, think about it. The species that we have the hardest problem with in captivity, almost uniformly across all things, and everything from frogs to lizards and snakes, they're all rainforest stuff.
Yeah.
And if you think about our caging, the way we tend to keep things, everything we do is dry. So the dry stuff does well because that's what we have developed over the last 50 years. We, for some reason, think we can take the rainforest out of a rainforest species, and that's when you say it, it sounds silly, but even I was of the same opinion, that wasn't necessary. But the more I worked on those anoles, and they're actually not even rainforest, they're from Cuba, so they get a similar amount of rain that we get here in Florida. It's really not a whole hell of a lot of difference. But when you lock them confine them into a small enclosure, you're responsible for how much water they get, because you're limiting where they can go and get their water. And so there was things like that. And then at the very end, which it was funny, man. I went for years pumping a large amount of water into those anoles, and I was always struggling to keep them hydrated. And I was like, I don't understand why this is the way it is, because I'm raining on them for an hour a day when it doesn't rain, and it rains here all the friggin' time. And yet they're always like borderline, they're always like on the verge of dehydration. And then someone relayed to me, I think it was Mike Lorette down in Miami. He mentioned to me that he knew somebody that was studying the giant anoles, I think in Florida, and they found that they're eating primarily fruit all the time. That they're not really eating insects and stuff like that. And then I started to think about it. I'm like, well, we coat all their bugs with calcium, which is a dehydrating powder, and then we shove this into these things, and we're not really giving them a lot of fruit. So I did a radical change in their diet. I took them off everything but they get fruit every day, and then they get hornworms once every 2 weeks. and it was a total game changer. Like it was a shocking difference. Now all of a sudden, now they always look, because they're eating all this fruit that has a high water content, and then there's probably vitamins and stuff they're getting from that. So I just rotate whatever random soft fruit is available at the time, so they get whatever, and all we do is we set it on these shelves, and they just eat it at will all the time. They're a hell of a lot cheaper to feed too now that they're not eating bugs.
For sure.
You can probably grow a lot of the fruits in your yard too, or get them locally sourced.
Correct. We have some of that, and I have people that give us like bags of mangoes and stuff. But all that went into the hydrating factor. So, I mean, again though, it's back to the DIY thing. It's just, I mean, all that shit. Like I said, I've tried commercial caging. Even when I wanted an indoor thing, I paid a guy to build very specific tanks for me for my indoor setup that I wanted. I wanted to fit a certain thing. I wanted a certain kind of airflow. Very specific materials. And I couldn't build my own tank, so I did pay a guy to do this. But that's still DIY.
You designed it.
You're not. I don't think I have anything here anymore other than the Zoom Ed screen cages, which are basically just overflow for when, if we have too much of something, then those are cheap, quick to assemble, and you can throw a potted plant in there and they're okay for a couple weeks and they're fine. Long term though, they don't. I've never been able to make them work, seriously. But yeah,
that's the other big question too, is like some of these commercially, and again, this is probably more on your side of the argument, but these commercial cages, like sometimes you're wondering who designs these, or again, maybe not, they don't fit every environment, and again, I guess I kind of already talked about that a little bit in regards to like chameleon keeping in Utah versus Florida. You're gonna have a different cage for different needs. So the commercial cages is kind of like one size fits all, but one size very rarely fits all. Sometimes you barely get it to fit one in the right environment.
Well, I mean, I almost feel like the caging, pre-made caging is almost like a materials and cost thing. What materials are available to make caging at what cost, and it was, primarily was glass, for a long time. And then now plastics are becoming, the way. So I don't even necessarily think like this is a different size box. You know what I mean? Nobody's making any enclosures in mind for animals. Out of the big manufacturers, right? Like they're just they're kind of a here's a whatever you're putting in here, you properly size it to that, and that's what goes in there, right? That's the idea, right? And so I mean, Ron's DIY is like for that animal, and I don't even think that there's any large manufacturers that are even saying our intent with this is this type of reptile, this snake. You know what I mean? So sorry, Justin, I don't
think Ron needs help.
Yeah, I know he doesn't, but I'm going to help him anyway.
It is a good point, but
and it's probably also not even worth it for them to do that. I mean, that's
I agree. I mean,
You can't really make a business off of,
and I guess that's what I was kind of coming at in the beginning of what I was saying is their considerations have zero to really even do with like reptiles. You know what I mean? It's almost what am I going to make this out of, and what sizes do I need to kind of like fill a nipper,
I heard an interesting podcast the other is Phil and oh my gosh,
Roy.
Sorry, Roy. Their podcast, they were talking to, again, name's going to fail me, but he's from Zach Porritt. He lives in Utah, and I didn't know who he was, but he's mostly into like aquariums and fish and stuff. Excuse me, but he built a giant like greenhouse in his backyard, and at first he was just thinking like a room size enclosure, and then it just kept expanding and expanding. And now he's
steamrolled from there, huh?
He's got this $15,000 greenhouse in his backyard with a pond, and he's keeping his arowanas and the big rays, black and white rays or whatever.
That sounds like my type of motherfucker right there.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, it looks pretty sweet. So I will say that, DIY doesn't always save money. You might be paying more, but you get the product you want.
But in the end, you're fucking awesome for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
And, so I guess it's not always a cost-saving venture, but I would say that it probably fits the needs of the animals better, if you can understand what they need and provide that with that cage, and design it with that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you look across all things, pretty much no matter what it is, doesn't matter. Any type of thing, even, just whatever it is. As soon as it's, most of the stuff produced by large corporations is just kind of generic, less than, never that good. You want some really good shit. If you want really good food, you don't go to a chain place. You go to some badass mom and pop place. You want really good, whatever it is, you go to a very specific people or a group of people that are doing this very specific thing. They're almost very small. And so when you're working with animals outside of especially for what we do, since reptiles are very, very specific in a lot of their needs, all the commercially designed shit is for the generic pet store crap. I shouldn't say it like that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You can keep a fish, a snake, a hamster, whatever you want in this 10-gallon aquarium or something.
So if you're a serious hobbyist and you're working on stuff that's not readily available in pet stores, like Chuck with those fucking amethystines or whatever, and, or with the emeralds or all the crazy stuff that you work on, you really got to DIY your shit because, I mean, I guess for the larger snakes, you're in a little bit of a better spot because basically people spend a lot of money and research working out the ball python rack. Like that thing that's a modern marvel right there. That CB70 rack is designed, no matter how you feel about whether they need more space or whatever, just put that aside. That thing took a snake that was formerly very difficult to produce. I remember when they were considered unbreedable. Like that was not something most people didn't even want to bother. They don't eat, they don't breed in captivity, all this. And now I mean, go to a show.
What do you see?
I mean, even little 8-year-old kids are doing it, because there's a plug and play system. Get your mom to buy you a couple snakes, get your mom to buy you a rack, plug it in, throw in food, and you're good. Yeah. Because it was very specifically tailored for that one fucking thing. Now it does have obviously some side effects that it does work on a few other species that are sort of inhabit the same kind of niche, ground dwelling, relatively dry. Yeah. And then to a lesser extent, the vision cages and stuff, they were designed for larger pythons and boas. Really, the boa constrictor is probably what drove that more than anything. If you look at the sizes of the cages and everything, that was the number 2. And but they work on other species that you can pull it off with. So, but outside of that, there's not a whole lot. Like, there's problems with all that stuff.
Isn't that maybe that's kind of the key to all this? If you want a commercially viable pet type of animal, you need to kind of figure those things out. I mean, you look at Alan with the crested geckos. He makes a diet for them. He figures out all these details and makes it easy for people to keep them. And so I guess when you're doing it commercially, you got to take that into consideration. How can I make this accessible to the masses? And maybe that's kind of one of the things. If you're DIYing it and that makes it very difficult to make it commercially available for the masses. If, you say, okay, you can keep this species, but you have to build this, giant.
I just want to say that I think making it available to the masses goes against the principles of DIY. Because, and here's why I say that, because what works in Ron's spot doesn't work in Justin's spot.
Well, I mean,
so how you DIY is specific to what you're doing, where you are, that kind of stuff. And
potentially, we just talked about the ball pythons and how, you know, they were unbreedable, but somebody
but they weren't breeding them in CB70 racks outside.
But what I'm saying is they
what I'm saying,
came up with the rack system,
and
then they became.
I get that.
So it did, it kind of was a way to bring it to the masses. But if you're saying you have to, do this complex thing to get them to succeed.
Right.
And very few people can do that or
I just think even indoors, you get enough, like, your winter and my winter indoors aren't the same.
Yeah.
My summer and Ron's summer aren't the same. I'm not
saying you don't have to adapt it to your local situation, but I think once you kind of figure out this is the primary need or the basic needs of this animal, and if it's very complex, that species probably won't be commercially viable. Not many people are going to succeed with it. Like you're saying, right?
You're saying making the idea or the concept of what like flowing lots of water through the cage as the concept, selling that, and then having people figure out how they accomplish that themselves. Is that what
not that you can't keep them other ways? And I think, of course, people have been keeping emerald basins, the emerald tree boas for quite a while without doing, the things Ron's doing. And I think he's taking it to the next level, of course. But so I'm not saying that, if somebody's successful like Ron with the emerald tree boas, that there won't be a market and people won't be able to keep them successfully. They just might not be able to take them to the edge, to the razor's edge.
I just look at it. With the way Ron's doing it is just such a proof of concept of it's kind of like once he breeds 80 fucking snakes year after year with that, everyone's going to be like, oh fuck, we can't keep them like this anymore. This is clearly we're wrong, right? And Ron is showing us he's right year after year. And so, it's really the only way to force. I think it's really the only way to force the change on people and you do it counterculture wise. You show them the other way because the industry's not going to show them. Industry's not going to change for them. Yeah,
Goddamn, Chuck. You and me gotta hang out, man.
Hey, bro, I'm on your. I vibe with you, dude. I've told you that.
What's funny about that is exactly so when Heather and I and Scott's bankrolling this. This is something that if I had to do this financially, we could not do this. So he's bankrolling it, but Heather and I. So the three of us sat down and we had this long conversation when I pulled this together, and they were looking at me like, "Holy shit, we got to do this." When I mapped it all out, but I have an entire map of. Not only are we doing this, I'm doing it outside first because that's where I have all this infrastructure for that. Like that's the simplest, but also because I'm looking, like I said, razor's edge. But at the same time, I have this 1,500 square foot building that we are working on an indoor version. So my system is actually indoor outdoor. Okay, but there's no reason why you could not. It just requires that, like you were just saying, Chuck, it requires you to rethink how you think about this, right? So you can't think about, okay, I'm just going to get, a vision cage with sliding doors and I'm just going to spray them with, a mister or whatever. That, just throw that out. You have to have drainage. You have to start thinking somewhat along the lines of like a fish company would do. You need to have a basin to collect the water. You need to be able to flood it. You need to be able to drain it. You need to be able to dry it. You need to be able to do all these things. But it's actually not that complicated. It sounds complicated, but realistically, these things, I don't feel like they're. I honestly, I really did, at this point, I'm almost 100% convinced that the vast majority of them in captivity are maintained in a mild state of dehydration, not enough to kill them, but not enough to really get that's why you see a lot of slugs. Slugs are definite. I'm 100% convinced after all the time I've been doing this that when you get infertile eggs, that's a big red marker that your animals were not hydrated well enough, whether it's in the males or the females or both. It completely dissolves if you stay on top of the water. And I mean, the biggest impact you can do for yourself is just to either overflow or add a little bit of water or clean your bowl every day. And I'm telling you that the effect is dramatic. And it's across, it doesn't matter, because you're telling that animal, hey, you got water, come drink. Otherwise, they're not going to expend the energy, at least in ambush predators, and to a lesser extent some more hunting species. But it seems like a shocking difference.
I heard an interesting discussion about water temperature, and that somebody had given their snake cold water, and it kind of went down and checked it out, but it didn't really do much. And then he gave it some warm water, and again, N of 1, take it with a grain of salt, but gave it some warmer water, and it went immediately in and took a big hearty drink. And he tried it a few times, to show that, and I'm not sure if that animal just preferred warm water or if that's a real thing. But what I'm curious to your thoughts on the temperature of the water.
See, so I'm not doing any of that. I'm using straight well water right out of the ground, but it's hot as fuck where I'm at. So when I'm pumping that water out and it's falling through the air, its temperature is probably being rapidly raised. So it's hard for me to say, but it wouldn't surprise me because, I guess depending on where you're at too, your groundwater could be a hell of a lot colder than mine. So there could be all kinds of things like that. I mean, I really at this point, I feel like we don't know shit about this stuff at all. Like all of our.
It's so complex.
You want to know what is an interesting side effect to this, though, that I haven't really brought up, I don't think. So obviously I'm doing all imports, right? All my chondros are imports, and I'm getting them from places that most people would not buy snakes from. So all the emeralds are imports except for a couple. So mites are a common thing, right? Mites cannot survive in my enclosures. Within a couple days, they're all fucking gone. And I know they've come in because I've opened the bags. I saw the mites in there. I didn't treat them. I wanted to see because I didn't think mites could survive in this environment. And sure enough, there's not a fucking one, not one. And some of these places are notorious for super mites. And then they come out of the wild. Obviously, some of them are like that. That mites are just a thing. Like they get treated, so most people don't run into them. But if you're dealing with imported snakes, most of them have come into contact with mites, and it's not really a big deal as long as you get rid of them. You don't want it, obviously. But there's not a fucking mite here, dude. They can't live in that thing. So I think that's another big plus to DIY because the enclosures we built don't facilitate mites surviving, reproducing, whereas the dry, somewhat cool environments, you created the perfect spot for the standard snake mite on top of it. And then not to mention, I was telling maybe it was you, I was talking about, the fact that UV is a natural virus inhibitor and good and clean air is too. So if you have good air circulation, UV, that makes a big difference when you're bringing in stuff that may or may not have anything. So, but our standard enclosures, they're in a box with low ventilation. Most people don't use UV on snakes. But it's very common in lizards, and it's very rare to have. And lizards carry all kinds of crap too. I mean, the gametes have adenovirus, and it's very rare though that you ever hear about a collection being wiped out or something like that. And initially I thought, well, it's because people are kind of tight-lipped about it, but it still gets out. Like if somebody loses a collection, they inevitably bitch to somebody about it, who then tells somebody else. So you find out. You know what I'm saying?
And are you saying that the reptile industry leaks like a sieve, Ron? Is that what you're saying?
Basically. The reptile industry is full of shit, but people are pretty, people don't tend to talk about it. I mean, I feel like if we did openly discuss a lot of this shit, we could make a lot more advances, because if you have a bunch of different brains working on these problems, we'd make more advances. But we're a little too worried about backlash or damaging. Like I just admitted that I had mites in all my snakes, but I guarantee you that when I prove this out and I produce them, I won't have any fucking problem selling them, and neither would anybody else, because when they leave here, they'll be fucking perfect, and there won't be a damn mite on them. So, I mean, so I'll openly discuss all that shit.
Yeah.
I don't even know where I was going with this, but I totally went off in left field. Anyway, that was one of the big pluses to the DIY thing, though, is that by radically changing up, I think I told you in a message, I basically looked at what everybody had done previously, nobody's really to blame for this, right? Like, but the foundation initially, way back like 40, 50 years ago, for this whole arboreal snake thing was faulty to begin with. Yeah. So all these guys that have come up since then have all just, they assumed that what they were told was correct, and then they've added, little things on top of it. And so, I mean, that's really the story, though, most of herpetoculture. Like, we don't do anything here the way standard. Like, I've had people come here and go, what the hell are you doing? None of this is supposed to be the way it is. And I'm like, well, we work within the confines of nature and use kind of a logical approach to things. There ain't a whole hell of a lot of logic in a lot of herpetoculture, unfortunately, at the time. I mean, at least on a certain level. I mean, obviously there's guys like you that, you hear, like, that's why I love podcasts, because you guys, pretty much all of you are serious, and you're all the guys that are actually using logic. But outside of a very small group of us, maybe 5%, the rest of it, not a lot of logic, a lot of bullshit that gets passed on as fact.
Yeah.
And so you're just mired in shit, and it's hard to figure out, So, honestly, that's been my whole thing the entire time that I've been doing this. I deconstruct everything down to, and then I start building back on top. Okay, this seems logical. This seems like it'd work. This seems fucking ridiculous. I don't know where this idea came from, so I'm going to put this over here. Sometimes those ridiculous ideas, you find out later on, oh, they're not so ridiculous because I just didn't know a certain thing, and now it makes sense. Yeah. But, man, a lot of times it doesn't make sense ever.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what I'm doing here. And, again, that's a DIY approach, is just like Chuck said, it's that counterculture, fuck you to the man kind of thing. I'm going to do the shit my way, and the hell with the current – the current paradigm or whatever. Yeah. Then I think needs to be a whole lot more of us doing that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I mean, again, that's, the trick is to get other people seeing the benefits of doing that work and doing that thinking and reasoning those things out, because you can make a lot of groundbreaking strides. But I think it's, laziness. It's easier just to kind of go with the flow and follow.
I don't know if it's laziness. I just think it's a lot of people are much more risk averse than Ron is. Yes, Ron's willing to stick his wiener into the deep end of the pool at a moment's notice. Tell me I'm fucking wrong. You know what I'm saying?
No, you're right, dude.
And most people aren't willing to risk. Most people don't have the pair to risk like that. You know what I mean? So most people are unwilling to. They'll take a suboptimal system and run with it because it can still be profitable.
But again, I guess I wouldn't see it as much of a risk, because he's experienced. He's taken, his lessons learned from other species. He's applying those things. He's thought about, this is not just a fly by night, like, oh, I bet if I do this is going to happen. Certainly we can agree. Sure.
Certainly we can agree that Ron takes much greater risks than even your average professional breeder.
Sure. No, I mean, definitely buying, a bunch of emerald tree boas and
keeping outside.
Applying these different concepts is definitely. But again, I mean, he's put the work in. I don't want to make it seem like he's so naive or anything. Like
no.
There's
a lot of people thought that. I heard stuff like that. I heard stuff. I heard people were saying, "Oh, he's crazy. There's no way they can survive. You got to keep him at 86 degrees maximum." I was like, "All right, well, they'll tell me pretty quick if that's what they need." And it turned out No, that's actually not true at all. That they would bask even when it was 97 fucking degrees outside. They had the ability. I don't force anything into it. So when I put stuff outside, it has multi-tiered zones that it can get whatever it needs, get out of. And they were intentionally basking until their body temperatures hit 94. And then almost to a fucking boa, they would retire into the shade, and then they would maintain that 94. And if they had to, they would stick a coil into a beam of sunlight and raise their body temperature back up.
Wow.
And that was eye-opening. I was like, okay, well, there's one bullshit thing kicked to the curb. But I think I understand it, though. If you keep them at a cooler temperature, you're not dehydrating them as fast.
Exactly.
So if you raise the temperature and you keep them in a dry box, you're going to fucking kill them pretty quick because they're going to dehydrate way quicker than if you're maintaining them at 82 or 86.
Yeah.
So they're probably, like I said, it's not severe dehydration. It's mild. It's mild enough that you feel like, oh, I'm doing everything right.
Yeah.
And you get occasional breedings this way, even though you're not really getting, a lot of viable offspring. You're getting some viable offspring. You're getting slugs. You're getting dry sheds. You're getting all this shit that's clear indicator that it's not enough, but it's not enough to put them in the ground. So, and I'm looking for that fucking optimal. I walk outside, everybody's bright green, their heads are blown out. The dome on the top of their head gets really, really full, and when they're really hydrated, they shine like they're dark. Yeah. It's, dude, I should have done these before and after with this group of Aruchondros that I got in recently. It was last week. They looked like shit. You could see their ribs. They were skinny as fuck. I almost passed on it, and then I was like, I really want these, so I'm just going to go ahead. I bought 13 of them, and 3 days. I posted a picture of one today. 3 days in this system, and man, that's a totally different snake.
That's so cool.
They all fed today. So I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, it is super risky. But I've got 40 years and
that's what I was going to say is
species.
Yeah. It is super risky, but I am the risk. I do take well, a long time ago when I was a kid realized there's no fucking point in playing it safe. Yeah. Playing it safe is just boring and it'll drive. I've had some spectacular losses with these risks. Yeah. But I've had some pretty damn good wins too. So and I value both of those things. I learned more. Yeah. I learned way more from the losses than I did from the wins. The wins, most of them, you kind of like, okay, that's awesome. I was able to keep going. I made some money. I did this and I added this notch, but you don't really learn a whole hell of a lot from those. But man, the times you get your fucking dick chopped off and that's brutal, man. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's happened a few times. So
yeah.
But I don't.
Well, and it happens even trying to play it safe too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Exactly.
Exactly. But like what Ron was saying is like, you risk and you lose, you learn, you risk and you win. But if you don't take, if you're the play it safe motherfucker, sometimes you win. Yeah. And sometimes you lose, but not like that. Not like that. You don't learn like that and you don't win like that.
Yeah. That's why I say it's kind of lazy because you're waiting for somebody else to do the work so you can just come in and say, well, I'll do it. But and typically that doesn't work out great either because when you don't put in the work and you don't put in the thought and you're just trying to copy somebody's methods, again, you have to adapt them. You have to have some thought. You have to have, use some brain power to make it work and get it to work successfully. You can't just copy somebody else's work. It just doesn't pan out in the long run.
Well, I think you can take somebody's model, but you have to be plugged in. You know what I mean? You can't just like, Ron just runs a bunch of water through there and that's the fucking story. Like, no, man, you missed the whole, you missed half the conversation, it's not just so, and I think that's where most people fail is they they under articulate the moment, like stuff that they're seeing and like not checking in and not like paying attention, because obviously, like Ron says, he does stuff that's negative to the animal's interest, but he realizes in short order and makes those corrections when he sees it not doing well, right? So he's not just put him in there, fucking walk away. It's like, okay, how is this moment to moment, kind of thing? Like it's, and that's where I think people just, they want to watch their animal. And I do think they want the best for their animal, but I just don't think they don't. I think it's so far, being a snake is so far from what most people can interface with. They don't even know where to fucking start.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious too. So, I mean, I think this is a great, nice little side road out, away from DIY, but I think it's very valuable to talk about. And you think about nature has a lot of swings and drastic changes and things like that. So, in a lot of these rainforest areas, they'll go through a dry period. Rather than a temperature swing, you've got a moisture swing. And I'm wondering if that's part of the idea. I mean, are you going to have that swing, or is it kind of maintain them at the optimal level at all times? Or are you giving them that period of dryness? And
I'm going to give them a drier period. I'm going to switch to basically a dew type scenario for the winter time once it gets cold enough. That is the next phase. That's the part that I'm worried about. It's like, okay, now I got to navigate the fucking winter here.
Yeah.
So we've already, like I said, we already did a couple things. One, I took my 2-car garage. I fucking went in there myself and peeled all the popcorn shit off the ceilings, because I'm going to put a whole bunch of emerald tree boas in there that are high humid, and that popcorn ceiling will just fucking fall down. So I went in there and I gutted the whole thing. I set it. It's the hottest. It is essentially an oven.
Wow.
So I can roll all 60 emeralds fit perfectly in this thing and give me room to go in and out of work. Then it has a pad in front of it that on nice days I can roll them out and get them sunlight and it gets full sun for all that I want. And then right on the other side of that, attached to my house, I have this really long porch that runs and it's all open, but it's covered, and it runs the entire length of the house. So I can actually put probably 150 of them back there, and that's totally shaded, and it creates this wind tunnel there that stays nice and cool. Like we built the lace monitor enclosures up against that so we could sit on the back porch and watch them, and I've had lots of people here do that.
Yeah.
So now we've cleared that out, so we can actually roll the snakes in there. So that's for the emeralds, and the chondros are out in this indoor-outdoor 1,500 square foot building. That will eventually be mostly for them. And inside that building, though, we're going to build a plastic, essentially a greenhouse that we can roll them into there and then heat that up if need be. I don't think I'm going to need that. And then, then there's other things to consider. If I'm heating the room, obviously I'm fucking drying it out, so I need to be able to compensate for that. So I think I have it all worked out, but I won't know until I go through it. And this is one of the reasons why I just haven't, just completely, like Chuck said, if I go out there and say, okay, well, I'm raining on these fucking things, somebody's going to think, oh, well, that's all it is. I'll just, and if you're keeping them at 86 degrees and you're pouring this much water on them and the ventilation isn't perfect, they're fucking dead. They're going to get respiratory. And then I'm going to hear, you killed all my No. I've been very specific about the fact that I took a fucking hammer to standard snake husbandry and then smashed it all into little pieces and picked up the few pieces that I thought were relevant to what I was doing, and then threw the rest of it in the fucking garbage and started over from the bottom. Because this is an entirely different way of doing this. So
now I imagine, as you're going through this and kind of fine tuning it and figuring out, if your hypotheses are ringing true, or if they're proving out, or if they're, you got to scrap an idea here and there. But I imagine, kind of the end goal is to be able to make that a commercially viable project. So people will be able to adapt it to their circumstances, and you can kind of help them along the way to figure out how to give these animals what they need to succeed.
That is what essentially, I don't know if you saw the photos of it, but the utility sink with the enclosure on the top is sort of like my DIY prototype version of this idea. It's an old idea. It goes way back. Bob Mayhew at Sandfire Dragon Ranch used to use it for chameleons and frogs 40 years ago. That's where I stole the idea from.
Yeah.
And I've used it for a ton of different stuff. I'm experimenting with it. I like some of it. But I think what it's going to take is eventually when this is all working and I can show, I've got all these babies and this is all working and everything that I think one of these cage companies will see
Yeah, for sure.
Ruby agrees.
Yeah, because friends of mine have, I think Keith
Chewy too
has said it recently, but he was like, dude, you just should you should be working on manufacturing your own commercial caging. Yeah. And we had actually discussed that, but it's so far out of our fucking wheelhouse that I mean, I'll never do it unless Scott decides to do it. But I think eventually though, this will be kind of a thing where you'll be able to go and buy a commercial unit that has a fucking drain in it that you can hook to a full, like the fish industry, and you can do what you need to do. I mean, it's actually not that
far-fetched.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, if somebody makes the right kind of nozzle that can attach, and then you can rain down on them, and
the new Ecos have a drain in the bottom of the glass. They cut a hole in the bottom of that glass, and they're putting a drain in there now, which is okay. But so even still, I think you're.
Well, and I think that's the key for these cage makers is to partner with somebody like you, Ron, and this and design it with your input and help, and then they kind of can take it to the commercial level. Sometimes
it's hard though. I think you got to find the right cage manufacturer. You know what I mean?
And if it's too expensive or too niche, then it's very difficult to make it fly. Yeah.
I mean there are some things out there now that were taken from that's like the second Daytona show ever. I had this very specific drawer system on display there that I was using to sell animals out of, and a cage manufacturer saw it, and then like 3 years later they were selling these exact same thing, so I expect the same thing to happen. I think a lot of them watch my page, and I think as they see this stuff going on, then they'll like, oh, I can make a way better, something that actually looks like super professional, probably collapsible. But the biggest hurdle there is kind of getting people to get outside of the dry box idea and start thinking about that. Yeah, that's fine for things that it works for, but a lot of shit it doesn't work for, and you could actually be like, I know that Warren Booth has said the same thing, and I think he's absolutely right. I don't think any of these snakes are that difficult. They're probably much easier than we think. I just think our fucking parameters are way off, and that once that's rectified, I think they'll be a common. I think you'll have lots of people producing them regularly. Because right now the market, even to this day, most of the ones that are in the trade, even the baby ones, those are not captive bred. Those are almost all imports. So there are some, there are people that produce a few here and there, but it's not a lot compared to how many of them are held in collections. Yeah. Right? I mean, there should be way more.
That's the sad truth of it, is that we do kind of. And I don't know. You wonder if it's just a lack of interest, or it's hard to compete against the import market, so we're not going to give it a go. Or it's hard to say. But a lot of one aspect of really that I don't enjoy about herpetoculture is that aspect of disposable pet. That we're willing to support the mass importation of half dead animals that go out to pet stores and go into people's homes, and they have them for a couple weeks and they die, and they go, well, I guess I don't want to keep reptiles because they just die, that kind of thing. But or they can get a captive bred ball python that's or a captive bred. Getting that difference or getting that point across to people is very difficult because the cost of the captive bred animal is obviously a lot more, and but they're gonna live, they're gonna thrive, they're gonna do well, and hopefully they can learn from the person they got it from. But that's one of the downsides of the hobby or the business.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. No, I just think I honestly don't know. I as far as the commercial viability of this thing, I personally think it's probably the most commercially viable endeavors I've ever gone on, if it works. Looking at what you can get for a captive bred ones and the demand I think that would be there if people knew, one, that they would be successful with them, because that's really what drives a lot of this, right? Most people, if they don't feel like they're ever going to be successful, then the value is not really there, and it's hard to make the sales. But all of a sudden, if everybody at least can, because you're kind of selling the dream, right? Yeah, that really is a big part of this shit. Exactly. You're selling the dream of, I can get these things, and I can maybe produce my own and have some awesome holdbacks, and maybe make a little money on the side to pay for this. Or you have kids that were like me that want to do this, for a living. So, and you have, obviously the whole gamut, a lot of people that fall in between those two things. But, when I started a long time ago, one of the things that I was told over and over again were tegus are not reproducible in captivity. Right? That was the thing that I really wanted to do when I was a kid. And people kept telling me that.
Boy, the shoe seems like it's on the other foot now, doesn't it?
Right. And so, me being the arrogant little shit that I am, I was like, fuck these guys, I'll figure this shit out. And then I had found this article about Bert Langerwerf, who had been producing the black and whites, and then eventually I got a hold of him. And he was really, when I saw that, and he was producing them, and I was like, okay, well, then at that point, everything seemed possible. All you got to do is figure it out, what the triggers are and all that. So, but that's, again, selling the dream. Now, all of a sudden, that was one of the first things I ever bought from him, were black and whites. Then eventually I was like, okay, this guy's killing it up there. I don't want to compete against him. So I sold my black and whites and the reds and then eventually the blues. That was my gig, right? So he's up there doing those. I'm down in Florida doing this thing. We're not competing against each other. Yeah. And I like doing my own shit, right? Yeah. I just don't like, that's why I don't do ball pythons. There's a lot of fucking money in those. I could have been. I could have been financially well off a long time ago because I had a lot of those founder morphs, but I just didn't give a fuck about them. Yeah. So I only do things that I really, have some interest in. And, I shouldn't say that because I have done things that nobody else was doing. Like the Anole thing started out, nobody was doing them. And I was like, well, fuck it, I'll go do them because everything is interesting and it'll be fun. I never expected that 10 years later I'd still be doing the damn things. It was supposed to be this, like, I call it rating, right? Yeah. I've always done this. If somebody pops up a new morph in something that's super popular, like we recently did it with the axanthic crested geckos, right? Yeah. I don't fucking do crested geckos, but I'll raid the morph. I'll buy one, buy some babies, make a bunch of them, sell them to collectors in the, while they're very valuable. And then as soon as the price goes down on them, I'm out and I sold the thing off. Yeah. And I'm on to and then I sit and wait for the next thing. That's one of the ways we've been able to fund, all this stupid risky shit that we do, is by doing that. And I've been doing that off and on for like 40 years. I know there's people that probably don't like that, but we don't advertise them anywhere and stuff, so we're not really affecting their market. Almost all of it goes overseas. So, I figured that out.
It goes to fund something far more valuable.
Yeah, good shit.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing wrong with using those commercially.
Not like that. Not like that. I think that's exactly how you, if you're going to participate in a system you don't agree with, that's the best way to do it, is use the money to fucking work it against the system.
Punk rock herpetoculture. Punk rock herpetoculture. Yeah,
that is exactly it, awesome.
Man. Yeah, of course. Fuck them.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's why we have no employees. It's just me and her. Yep. She's as hardcore about this as I am. that's why I've been able to make as many advances as I have over the last 5 or 6 years. She's been a huge part of that because her husbandry is so far above mine that she catches shit that I would have not caught. She'll be like, I think this is going on in this zone, and then I'll go out there and look at it, and then her and I'll figure out how to rectify it. But it's really awesome. Good having two long-term herpetoculturists that have different skill sets. Yeah, it's been extremely valuable. So, but that's all DIY shit, man. It's fuck the system and do your shit. And
I'm having a struggle to think of anything, kind of against DIY.
I know. I thought about that. I was like, because all three of us are kind of like that, so we're just like not going to be much of a fight. But
no,
but it's I think the only challenge is finding out what to do with the failures, where to, like you said, the big pile of trash in the backyard. I guess you can set out board lines and go herp, in your backyard.
Yeah, I actually have that too because I have 5 acres and there's all kind of stuff here.
Yeah.
So we have hognose and indigos and stuff and lots of gopher tortoises.
That's cool.
All I ever find did I ever tell you guys about the fucking yellow rat snake?
I think so. The
one that ate $7,000 worth of rare animals.
Oh, maybe not. Oh no!
Oh my god! So for a couple of months, fucking these extremely expensive rare anoles were just vanishing from the enclosures. The enclosures were locked. They didn't escape. I thought I was losing my fucking mind. And then for a while there, I thought, well, maybe one of the neighbors is jumping the fence and coming in here and stealing one or two. But it didn't make sense because in one particular enclosure, the only 2 blue-bellied night anoles that I had were gone. But another anole that was an albino that was in there was untouched. And then it was just weird, right? And then a baby lace monitor disappeared. And I was like, what the So I actually, when the monitor disappeared, I got on the phone and I called all the reptile pet stores in Florida. And I was like, hey, if some asshole shows up with a lace monitor and a bunch of this other shit, let me know.
Yeah.
Because it's missing. Well, it turns out that a 3-foot yellow rat snake figured out that it could come up through the drains in my tub system.
Oh, no.
And it had eaten, it ate 2 adult podior, the 2 blue-bellied anoles. It killed the only Bacell albino in existence, and it ate the smallest of 2 lace monitors that were in this enclosure.
That is tragic.
Man, that is worse than a cat. That is like cat murder.
This went on for like 6 months, and the only reason we found it is Heather came out to talk to me about something because she was going somewhere, and she said, "Hey, I've got to go." And she goes, "Why is there a yellow rat snake shed? Why is there a snake shed in with the albino anoles?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I look over, and there's a fucking shed all around in this albino anole cage. And in the cork log, well, that enclosure was attached to 3 other enclosures that only had a small separator, and I started going through them, and on the second or third one, there was no anoles. The podior that was in there was gone, and inside the cork tube was a rat snake with a perfect outline of an adult podior.
No way.
Yeah.
That sucks.
That's DIY caging for you.
Yeah. DIY caging for you. Damn, you didn't have that story, Justin. That would have been a good one for you.
Oh my god. I was so pissed. Yeah. I was like, holy shit, that explains everything.
Yeah,
and
that is
what it
definitely the only downside to DIY caging, right there.
I saw honestly, that I can't believe that snake was able to get up these drains.
That's crazy.
But the cork logs are what screwed me because it would get in there, it would eat something. It was too obviously you couldn't get back out the drain with a giant freaking lizard inside of it. So it sat in those cork tubes until it digested it enough to get out and go to the next thing.
Oh, God. And so he was just growing well, shedding, eating
we
tens
found
of thousands of dollars.
Multiple sheds.
My gosh.
Now, there may have been more than one There may have been a couple of them doing this, but I'm pretty sure it's just the one.
Oh
and
my gosh.
underneath the sinks, wrapped around the things, were shed skins from him, multiple shed skins.
No.
So he'd been there for a while.
Oh God.
Eating well.
So how did you fix it? Did you just put a
green on the drain?
Yeah, we put grates on the drain, and that animal now resides at Eddie Soto's house. He was there the day.
There you go. Because you're never getting released from prison.
No, not out there. No.
You're in a fucking max security prison forever now, dude.
I know.
No,
right?
man.
No, I told him he lives, near a park. It's a native species. So I was like, on your way home, just drop this thing off. And he's like, fuck no. He's like, this thing's got a story. I'm gonna keep this.
He's got gold in that belly.
I swear to God. It's like a $10,000 fucking yellow rat snake.
That's sad. At least. I
know.
Like, wow.
I try not to think about it.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah,
nature's brutal. I guess you gotta,
I could not figure that out, man. I'm like, why the fuck is somebody breaking in and stealing these random things and then locking the cages back up? There was no way they got out. It was driving me. Then I was thinking, maybe it's somebody that comes over here, and I'm starting to get all suspicious and shit. and it was a fucking rat snake.
God damn.
That's good.
Yeah, you've got the best stories. I could listen to your stories all day. Some are sadder than others, but
yeah.
Yeah,
you do this shit long enough, man. Stuff happens.
Yeah, right.
That's true.
Oh well, we appreciate you coming on. I mean, you're the wealth of knowledge. It's just unparalleled, and we appreciate you coming on, sharing your ideas and talking these things out. It's really valuable to myself. I learn a lot from these conversations. So
I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
No, we appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure the listeners are going to get some really good ideas and information, and hopefully, I think one of the main points is put in the work, do the thinking. Like you said, get a hobby or an area of your own where you can kind of make these groundbreaking discoveries and bring other cool species to the spotlight. Don't just follow in other people's footsteps. Get a little punk rock herpetoculture going and get some new stuff in the hobby. That's kind of where the fun is, I think, and where you can stay excited about things and break new ground. And I don't know, that's good stuff. So, yeah.
Well, and I think Ron's definitely even showing that even stuff that we've had in the hobby for a while, you can break new ground in by the way you keep it or work with it. And I mean, there's just so much. Like Ron said, we don't know shit. We don't know shit. So there's just so much to do.
Yeah. If you look at it, only a very small number of species are success stories in this hobby.
Oh yeah,
it's a tiny number.
Yeah,
there are a lot of stuff in the hobby, but most of those are not success stories. They're some varying levels of success, but none of them are like there's not that many ball pythons and leopard geckos, and it's not because the stuff can't be there. Unless it's like something that's like super low productivity, like Karusha or something like that.
Yeah,
but even those.
Yeah, there's this. Shinglebacks. There's a huge demand, but it's really hard to get a colony started, and to make that happen. And
and that's probably the biggest barrier on the shinglebacks. But Karusha, they still do import them, so you could, if you could fund it, you could. If you had the space and the desire, you could go at it pretty hard.
I don't know if you saw John Felicity.
Oh yeah, Felicity.
Yeah,
I can't say his name either, but I know him. He's
sorry, John.
He's doing a cool guy. Shit up there. Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I had to call him as soon as I saw Gary's video. I went and looked him up, listened to his few podcasts, then I called him on the phone. I'm like, this is cool stuff.
Oh yeah, you should totally get him on here.
Yeah. But he's DIYing it,
I know.
for sure, and making it work. So I wish him all the luck because he's got some amazing stuff that I would love to keep someday. So I love this hobby, and I love, the idea of making that. I think one of the things that really brought that to light for me, that, how many things are out there. Like I got that Book of Snakes by what's his name? It's up there.
Is that a Mark O'Shea?
Mark O'Shea, and he had a few representatives of every type of, or every group of snakes. And I was in there, I'm like, I have never heard of half of these things, and you're reading their description. It's like, oh, they specialize on feeding on blind snakes. Okay. That's going to be difficult. Right. Yeah, exactly. But they're beautiful, they're really cool looking. So I'm like, well, I guess that's one for, herping. That's what herping's going to satisfy, is finding that thing in the wild. And
all those slug eaters.
Exactly.
I used to catch mud snakes down in South Florida all the time, and they were amazing. You're like, oh my God, it's as big as a king snake. It's got a bright pink stomach. It's shiny black, and they're really awesome. And they also eat fucking sirens, so forget it.
Yeah, there's no way to really keep those.
Yeah,
I guess you could maybe try to get them over to axolotls or something. And breed axolotls or something. But that's the trick, I guess. Thank you so much for coming on and spending your time fighting with us. It's been a pleasure.
So, we never do any fucking fighting.
Right. No, we don't.
We don't ever fight.
It's true. Sure, we got to get you and Alan on here. You guys will show us what it's about.
There'll be some banging heads there.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Yeah, guys.
Are we gonna have to goad Alan into it?
Yeah,
I tried. It didn't work.
He doesn't goad well.
No, he's a stubborn motherfucker. That's for sure.
We'll have to find his trigger.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time for another episode of Reptile Fight Club.
That was fucking awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Fight Club.